Hello and welcome to Are You Ready To? This is part 2 of junk journaling with me, making this Christmas/holiday vintage style recipe book junk journal. In part 1, I gathered all of my materials, picked the printables I wanted, printed them all out on cardstock, constructed the cover out of a Kirkland brand granola bar box. Very sturdy box. This is the back side of it here. And now I'm going to make the inside cover as well as an inside pocket out of an Nespresso sample box. I'm going to, in this part 2 video, show you how I sew in all the signatures into their casings. I guess I kind of just made that term up. I don't know. I have like a casing signature, so to speak. I'm going to call it that anyway. And I sew all that into this junk journal in this video, as well as I show you how I make and put together my signatures. So as you see here, I have been using a pair of crafting scissors. They're very heavy duty and sharp. Love them. I made sure I cut the pattern off the top and bottom of the center piece that I'm adding to the inside cover, and then the outer edges of my papers I'm using on the outer edges. So I had cut out a stencil piece from the spine that I use as a guide, and I used it to do a pre-fold of my center piece of cardstock that I'm about to glue down. It just makes it go into the edges a lot easier than adding it first and then doing a fold. It can kind of mess it up a little bit, and this is a very thick piece of cardboard, so doing refolds in the cardboard itself is just not a good idea. So here I am gluing everything down. I'm using the blend with my finger method, making sure I get all of the corners really, really well. And then after I add a very good amount of glue, and let me tell you, this glue works great. So after I add a fair amount of glue, I'm going to smush it in between books, let it dry. So the glue that I'm using is extra strength Elmer's glue. I really love that glue. It's worked out great. It dried really nicely. This junk journal is very sturdy. It's going to be around forever. I'm very happy with it. So here I'm using an Nespresso sample box, and I want a deep pocket for my inside cover so I can stick a lot of recipe cards in there, so I can add note cards, because the idea of this recipe book junk journal for me is to utilize recipe cards more than the actual pages, so I can take them in and out of this recipe book and work with just the card and not the whole recipe book itself. And then I will utilize the pages to add pockets, to add pictures of the recipes I'm making, to add pictures of my family enjoying the recipes. I'm just really excited. I really am planning on passing this down to my boys if they're interested, and having this around for a long time. So as you can see there, I'm just folding this box so it really gives me a lot of space once I glue it onto the inside cover of this recipe book junk journal. And I'm folding up the bottom edges, kind of like folding a present, and making sure that it's wide enough to fit the recipe card. And that, when I was satisfied with that, Then I got to adding and preparing my back cardstock piece. So the idea is I am going to attach this pocket to this piece of cardstock using my split pins, which I've used already on the cover and throughout, I will be using throughout this junk journal. So I'm going to attach the pocket to the piece of cardstock, and then I'm going to glue with that really good, really strong Elmer's glue. I'm going to put a lot of glue on it, and I'm going to glue it to the inside cover of this recipe book. As you saw, I was really careful to line up the holes that the push split pins are going through that I made with my awl. And now I'm just going to put those split pins in through the Nespresso box pocket piece that you saw I did also cover with a piece of cardstock. And I'm going to now attach it to the back cardstock piece. I'm also going to do 2 more holes at the top just to make it really nice and sturdy. I really want to have this around for a long time. Look at all that space there. There's so much space for a lot of recipe cards. I am so excited. And now I'm going to construct a note cards pocket for the front of this large pocket. All I did was flip it over, trace out a piece of cardstock, cut around the cardstock, traced lines with my crafting scissors, and then glue it on with the Elmer's Glue All Extra Strength Formula glue. Because of that extra folded over cardboard piece, it makes it so much easier to make the folds for this note card pocket. So see how I left a lot of space there? Kind of like a mini spine in this front pocket here. And then I used my split pins again and glued in I did a little surgery on that little torn piece of cardstock, which you could still see the tear mark, but it doesn't bother me. And then I put a little glue around the bottom so my note cards wouldn't fall out. And now I'm just using a ton of glue, making sure I'm getting all the edges before attaching it to the inside cover, pushing it down really good with my ruler. Really have to push it down good there so it attaches. And then I'm going to also, just to be sure it's attached properly and it's going to stay on there forever, I'm going to weigh it down with a couple of my little crafting supply containers and glue a little note card piece of cardstock on the front. And that will complete this inside cover pocket. Look how cute it is. Can add my note cards in that front pocket as well as my bigger note cards and recipe cards in that back pocket. Look at all that space there. Perfect. Love how that turned out. Now I have a nice pocket in the front for a recipe card, whatever one I'd be working on that day. And I have a nice inside pocket for multiple recipe cards and note cards that I can grab from to add to the rest of my junk journal recipe book. So now I have to get to work on making the pockets for, the casing pockets for my signatures. You'll see what I mean when I show you. I use nice cardstock. As you can see, it has like a texture on it. I've used all the pink sheets out of there. I still had all of these black cardstock pieces, which I thought would be perfect in this recipe book. And I used my spine stencil to fold these cardstock pieces, each one a little less wide, the spine width a little less wide than the previous one. So they're all going to fit into each other at the end of this, and you'll see what I mean. I created pockets by sewing the outer corners, and I created this front pocket by sewing that on first before sewing the outer corners, as you can see there. I'm not a professional seamstress by any means. It's a little crooked, but I still like the character it gives this project, and you could certainly just use split pins or hand stitch if you don't have a sewing machine, or you can also just glue in the sides. There's so many options. So I'm going to show you how to make a pocket on one of these other little casing pockets here. And I'm just going to take a piece of cardstock and I'm going to attach it with my split pins and then glue the bottom edges, and that's that, and the top corners as well. And that's that, and you could create a cute little pocket without having to use a sewing machine. And I love these gold push split pins. They just add a special touch to this recipe book. They're nice and sturdy. They really are a great tool to work with. Now I'm going to show you how I made these pocket casing pieces. First, I folded every piece of cardstock in half, so I had a nice fold line right down at the center point. I need that center point for later on when I sew in the casing signature into the spine of the junk journal. So that center line is important, not just for that, but also to size my fold lines for my little mini spines, just to ensure that they're all slightly smaller than the previous. Then I make the necessary folds, and I do this 5 times over. So I end up with 5 of these casing folder pieces. I hope you see the vision so far and understand what I'm getting at here. So here's the first 3. After I finish all the spines of these cardstock pieces, then I will make a fold up from the bottom to create that front and back pocket, and I will sew the outer corners of each of the cardstock pieces in order to create that front and back pocket. So I'm going to go do that and show you how it turns out. Okay, and here are all of my casing pieces here. Front and back folders. Actually, this is 4 of them. One of the pockets I'm going to create using my split pins because I really like those. They're so pretty, and like I said, I use them throughout this entire junk journal construction. I also picked up these really cute coffee to go cups at Burlington. They had so much Christmas stuff there. The cutest things that were really inspiring for junk journaling. I told my son to go grab me a blindfold and put it over my eyes, or else I was going to buy way too many things. But in all seriousness, I did come home with some notepads and these cute to-go cups. I cut out the little Santas with my crafting scissors and add them to all the blank pocket pieces. This is the casing that I used split pins instead of sewing to create the front and back pockets. Now those casings will make one signature. Just in case you don't know what I mean when I refer to signatures, a signature is a grouping of papers that get sewn into your junk journal. So when I refer to those casing pieces being one signature, they do make up one signature in the end that I then sew into the spine of my junk journal. Using that beautiful cream color resume paper that you just saw, I'm going to create the signatures that I sew into the casing signature. So I printed out the designs I wanted on that beautiful cream resume paper that I picked up at a paper pound thrift shop, and I cut them all down to the size that I wanted. Now these are not going to be folded and added into this junk journal. The first cut that I made, I used that piece of scrap paper to use it as a size piece to make accurate cuts with the rest of my papers here. And then I take those scrap pieces of paper, make a nice sharp center fold, and then use that scrap piece of paper to glue two of the pages together. This junk journal took me days to make. As I said in part 1, I made a mess of my kitchen island. It was a mess for days until I completed this junk journal, but I had a lot of fun making this and I love how it turned out. This glue, again, got the job done here. It did what I needed it to do. And I absolutely love how there's multiple patterns there on all these signature pieces. I think it looks so cute in the end. I love it. To make the signatures that I sew into the casings, I use 3 of those tucked into each other. So the 3 2-page signatures that, if you count front and back size of each pages, which I do in a signature, they're considered to be 12-page signatures. In the end, I made 8 12-page signatures to sew in to the outer corners of my casing pieces for this junk journal. So here's my casing signature. All of them are tucked away into each other, so that makes one giant signature. And then here are my 8 other paper signatures. And now I'm just going to line them up to show you how I'm going to sew them in to the casing signature. So how I'm going to sew them in is I'm going to sew each one of these signatures into the outer corners of each pocket casing piece, as you saw there, leaving the center spine piece empty. So the 5th inside casing folder piece will not get signatures sewn into the outer corners of it. Like I said before, the idea here is to utilize the recipe cards so I can take them in and out of this junk journal recipe book. So I was just sizing up the recipe card in the front pocket, just wanted to see what it would look like. And I tucked all the signatures into the casing signature just to line it up really well and make sure everything's going to look good in the end. And I could still see Santa peeking out from the back cover, which I could. And once I was satisfied, I got to sewing in all those signatures using my vintage cross-stitch needle I love this needle. I was saving it for a special occasion, and this is just the perfect time to use this needle. Okay, when sewing in signatures, I just use a simple method where I go, after making my holes, of course, I go in through the center hole, starting on the inside of the signatures, out through the back part, which would be the spine, and then back through the center hole, back up through the top, and then when I pull the thread through the top hole, I make sure everything's nice and tight. I always check the back, make sure it's nice and tight there, that nothing is going to get loose. And then I loop my embroidery floss, which is what I usually always use, down through the bottom and then tie it off. I think this time I tied it off about 4 times before cutting the string, just to make sure that it wasn't going anywhere. At this point too, you could add charms or anything that you would like, but I'm just doing a simple cut to each one of these signatures. So this here could really be a junk journal in and of itself, and I am going to make smaller recipe book junk journals to probably give away as gifts this holiday season. But you know my plan already, and this is going to be done 8 times over by the time I finish this junk journal. Here we go. That's what it looks like in the end. Just that one folder casing sewn into the outer corners. Okay, I'm going to do this 6 more times, and then I will show you the end result. This is actually my favorite part of making junk journals. I love sewing in the signatures into the spine of the journals. I don't know why, it's just so satisfying. Once all my signatures were sewn into the casing signature, I compiled them all together, made sure they all lined up, and got out my trusty clothing pins and secured them all together. That is the centerpiece that I did not sew the signatures into. I have so much to work with here. I am so excited. I can't wait to add all the tabs and sections to this recipe book. I can't wait to work with this recipe book. So exciting. Now that I have everything lined up, it's time to sew it into the spine of my junk journal cover. I, of course, measured to make sure that the holes lined up before making the punctures in the spine. I chose to make the punctures in the spine first and then line up the signature and make the hole from the outer part of the spine into the signature. I just thought that that would be a good idea. What I should have done looking back is took the clothing pin and pinched my signature and spine together, which I do not know why I didn't do that. Just looking back at the video, it's like I should have done that. It would have made it more flush, but I did not. Then using paper clips, I just used them as a placeholder. Just makes it easier than when you go to make your other punctures and then, keeping them in there before sewing in your signature into the spine of your junk journal. I made sure to measure where I wanted my puncture holes to be again. just to ensure everything lined up properly. I used my paper clips on all 3 holes as a marker and a placeholder, and made the punctures on the tops and the bottoms through the outer part of the spine, like I did for that center puncture hole. And once I got all my paper clips inserted as my placeholders, I got out my thread and I sewed in the casing signature using the same method that I used for the rest of my signatures. Out through the center hole, down through the bottom hole, back out through the center hole, back in through the top hole, and tied it off. Now I did this twice. I did 2 pass-throughs through that first set of 3 holes that I made. And now it's time to make 6 more puncture holes. So I want to make 6 more puncture holes so I can secure closer to the outer corner of my casing signature. This really helped a lot. It really helped secure that casing signature in place. I have yet to make 2 more holes as well. So I'm going to line everything up. I'm going to get all 6 puncture holes made. I'm going to sew those in just like as you see there, and that's the end result. Now I'm going to make 2 more puncture holes. One at the very top, one at the very bottom. And I'm going to use the center puncture hole that I already have as my center hole. I know it's a lot of sewing for one signature, but it's well worth it for how sturdy and secure this recipe book really is in the end. So I just cut off all my excess string. It looks a little messy, but I actually love the way that it looks. Like I said before, I love sewing in my signatures, and I always love the end result. So here we have the finished product. We have our inside pockets that will hold our recipe cards. We have all of our signature pages that I will be utilizing and putting tabs on, labeled cookies and candies and casseroles and you name it. I have the front cover finished. Everything sewn in. I do go back and push in some of those holes there. Some of the papers around, or I should say the surrounding cardboard around those holes, I do push those back in a little bit to make it look a little less sloppy. I mean, it's a handmade item. It's not necessarily sloppy, but I just wanted to make it look a little nicer, I should say. Got all my recipe cards together, and I'm going to put them in my inside pocket with some note cards and add my note cards in my note card pocket. Just turned out great. How do you think this turned out? I know it was a lot of work to make, and I really am sorry if I did not explain things properly. If you are going to try and make this out of a thick piece of cardboard and follow my lead here, I'm very sorry if I did not explain things properly. If you have any questions, please just comment down below and I'll do my best to try to answer your questions. But this is how all the pages turned out. I love the detail of the scrap pieces of papers in the inner corners there. I think it looks absolutely adorable. There's the center piece. I wanted to leave that empty too because I'm going to fill this junk journal. So if I'm filling the junk journal, I needed that space so it would actually close. So that's why I left the center part of the casing signature free of paper signatures. There you have it. There's the back cover. Absolutely love how this turned out. A ton of pockets, a ton of places for note cards, a lot to work with here. Very structurally sound in the end, and hopefully will last a lifetime. Well, I just want to thank you so much for watching Are You Ready To? I hope I inspired your creativity this holiday season. Thank you again, and see you next time on Are You Ready To?